For you?
Stacey, where are you speaking? You're doing another Zoom for someone too?
No, I did one for the Mornington group.
Which group?
Mornington, Peninsula.
Yeah. But there wasn't another one?
No.
You're not doing another one?
No, I don't think so, Dave.
Okay. I thought I'd seen it. It must have been an old one.
Yeah.
Please, that's working. I believe YouTube is now working.
Tomorrow night, dinner plates at 12 paces.
Le cordon bleu. Restaurant rumble. Cordon bleu. French culinary giant Le Cordon Bleu, steaming over a humble Aussie cafe.
It's bullying from a big business to a very small, low-key business.
It was cheeky.
It's ridiculous. Thank you, we said pretty.
I mean, you've heard this one, so.
That's tomorrow, and that's happening.
My retirement present to myself.
Oh, there he is.
Can you guys see that? I've
Yep.
got a million windows open here.
Got the agenda there.
You see the agenda? Oh, sweet. Okay. Well, I just now I've got just too much fun going on here. Another 11 people coming in.
Oh, good.
Well, I'll just see how many are on. I'm just watching YouTube at the moment.
So is this the talk you're going to give us, Stacey?
No, probably not. This is a more general one. Although that depends on how far the progress goes too.
I believe we have 12 on YouTube and they're still coming in. We'll wait a bit longer.
No, we shouldn't be on YouTube.
31, 32, 33. Here.
Gary,
David.
did you enjoy the meeting last night?
Yeah, it was a lot of detail there.
It was incredible detail.
I couldn't think of a question.
Can someone turn off their radio, TV, or whatever?
Pretty depressing, really.
Yeah. It's very sobering. Yeah.
I may need to
Go off the news, mate, or whatever that background is.
yeah, I'll mute. But what I'll do is I'll mute everybody. But please, if you want to talk, feel free to.
Why isn't it going to? There you go.
You know what I mean?
What's wrong, Audrey?
Yeah, sorry.
Glad you looked a bit sick, Justin.
Is that one hand read, Justin?
Okay.
Is it hand read?
Yeah. Hear it?
Ben, you're looking good, mate.
I always look good, but I've got a face for radio, so I can't show it.
I like you with a blank screen.
That's why I like to be, actually.
I just wish Stacey had learned the same trick.
I normally do. I just had to undo it this time.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't like looking at my mug.
I can see
Sorry
you
for you
now.
guys.
It's in there. You can see you there.
Sorry, there's still someone with a radio or something on. I'll mute everybody, but you guys who want to talk, by all means, unmute yourself and talk. So yeah, everybody stopped now. I've scared them, except for Ben. He's unmuted himself, of course, but he's not bloody talking.
I'll try not to.
Sorry, I just wanted to, whoever it was that had their TV or something going. Just check the waiting room again. I think we've pretty much got. It doesn't seem to be a million people coming in. So, it's just. I'm presuming you're seeing that YouTube as well, are you? Are you seeing that? So we've got.
Can you hear me? I'm seeing it.
Yeah. So there's 17 on YouTube at the moment, and I believe, whatever there was, 30 odd, in excess of 30 here on Zoom. So that's pretty good. We might make a start. So Maddie, as you know, isn't well. She did have a small op, and she was on the improve and was much better. But she had stitches and stuff out, I think, today. So she was in a bit of pain. She's taken some endone and knocked herself out, basically. So, good luck to her. She'll be having a good night's sleep.
Can I use a script?
Her
Or what?
apologies.
Too much information.
And she's apologising that I'm chairing the meeting, I think, actually, not that she's not here. Anyway, welcome everybody, and thank you. Thanks very much for joining us. And please encourage, although, obviously it's great to have members on here, but even if you're not a member, they can all access it via the YouTube channel. They just can't annoy us directly during the meeting, I suppose. They can just watch. But, encourage everybody to get involved and watch too, because it's not just about, in our view anyway, it's not just about the number of members we've got. It's getting it out there to everybody. Really is as important as the number of members. Ben, sales table update.
Yeah, not much to report. We've had a couple of orders come through, but with me on house arrest, I can't exactly get out at the moment.
Why
So
are
just
you on
wait to
house
see
arrest? Haven't you been vaccinated?
No, it's not related to COVID.
Who let Simon Degenhard in? Oh, it was me.
It's a 10-week wait for me to get in, unfortunately. So I'll be on house arrest for a little bit longer.
The trailer's up for rego, but my dearly beloved wife said that there was something came out that you don't actually have to get the pink slip at the moment, given COVID. So we can probably re-register it, and you can. I don't know what the deal is. You probably got to get a pink slip later on once restrictions go. So that's one less job for you to do as well.
Yeah, not sure if we can leave for a pink slip, so I'll look into that one.
Yeah, you probably do it for your work trailers and stuff too.
We did get an order get sent to me from Gary with a few products in it, but that's all that's turned up. And I obviously can't get out.
Very good, thank you, Ben. Brian, secretary, and so on.
I'm just holding the space bar down, hoping that's unmuted. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
With the sales table stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, that people can still send their orders to you, and when you're allowed out, you'll sort them out. Is that correct?
That is correct.
From membership and secretary stuff, towards the beginning of the month, we paid our ABA membership. ABA this year dropped their membership fees down to $2. So I shared at the club the membership this year. And we've had 3 new members since the last meeting, 3, I think, maybe 5. And the only other thing is the next magazine is about to go to print, but we've still got time if people want to place any ads in there. Maybe one day they'll let us out and we can share birds between each other. But if you want any messages, I've got, I think, 2 or 3 ads already, but if you've got any others, please get them through to me in the next 5 days, it'll be good. And my other plea is, if you haven't had a vaccine, go and get one, and then get the second one, because I'm sick of this. And the sooner we all get vaccinated, the better. And tell all your bloody mates, fellows, and anybody else you know to do the same.
Thank you.
That's it from me.
That's it from you. All right. Let's guess that's me next. Treasurer's report in the bank account at the moment. There's the amounts on the screen there: $27,827.98. You'll be pleased to know. Remember, you're not pleased to know that we cancelled Spring into Finches and soft bills, but we did. We managed to get all the money back, which was great. So we got all the money back for the hall hire, various caterers, and so on, all the rest of it. Even Mount Annan Botanical Gardens, after Brian mistakenly sent an abusive email to them in reply, not realising he'd hit reply all, I think. And that may have actually worked in our favour, because originally they were only going to give us, but strange, the only state-run facility that we booked, and they were only going to give us 50% back. And Brian sort of, basically said, oh, for God's sake, or whatever it was that went back to them. And then they reassessed it, and they're going to give us a whole lot back. the interesting thing is, I'm sure they will give it back. It because it's state, it takes up to a month for them to refund the money. Whereas all the private organisations, everything, the money was back in the account the next day. So there you go. Anyway, we are getting all the money back, so that's good. So that is actually an accurate assessment so at the moment, which is pretty good. What else was something else I was going to say in terms of treasurers? It can't be that important. There's no major bills that are still outstanding. There is a bit of money owing to me for printing and postage and so on. But that would be, I can't remember what it is, but there's probably $1,000 or something for the last magazine and packing and that sort of thing. But that's roughly where we stand. I will get on and do the ready in preparation for the AGM, the annual report and all that sort of stuff, and financials, profit and loss statement and balance sheet and everything. We'll do that. And that will come to that won't be in this magazine, it'll be in the next magazine. General business, we've already done that. We've already apologised from Maddie that you have to put up with me chairing the meeting. In terms of government stuff, there is a bit that's gone on. I won't go into huge detail. I'll stick to sort of things maybe that are to do with New South Wales because they're more relevant. Although I will just quickly mention the export of, well, particularly parrots, but it's exports generally. There's been further meetings about that. They've employed a further consultant, so like a KPMG mob, I don't know, I've been calling the Talk Fest. So there were further meetings about that to progress Federation's policy that what should happen is that there should be DNA parentage testing. So I also enrolled to meet, so I met with them and explained the whole thing. I also got a couple of other people, well, Murray McPherson, who you know is a member here. He met with them, but perhaps more importantly than Murray, not that Murray's not important, was, sorry, I'll just submit a couple more people, was
Thanks, Sam.
Simon, sorry, Murray, was Dr. Simon Griffith, who you know from Macquarie Uni, spoken many times, and also Dr. David Groth from Perth, because they've obviously got scientific expertise in terms of the DNA parentage tests. So I don't know how long it'll take for that to come through, but hopefully that means that exports will be able to progress in a sensible way. They were looking at introducing for those who were involved in Nebris years ago, a Nebris style thing where they were going to require all parrots throughout Australia to be marked, you know, either with a closed ring or otherwise. Do you want to add anything, Murray?
Not particularly. I think the discussions I had with them, I thought was very positive. They seem to be very sympathetic towards aviculturists, and I was pleased or pleasantly surprised that they seem to be, you know, looking at the broader picture rather than just, you know, exporting native birds means, you know, they must be trapped from the wild rather than, you know, I think they finally got it, or at least the three gentlemen I spoke to, you know, seem to at least understand that they are captive bred native birds we're talking about, and not, you know, poaching from the wild as, you know, every journalist seems to think is what we're doing.
Yeah, so that's so just to really briefly recap Federation's policy. The policy is if Australia, and this also complies with our CITES obligations in Australia, if Australia can be absolutely confident that the birds that are being exported have been bred in captivity, then essentially this shouldn't be any different to dogs, cats, horses, cattle, whatever. There's no need for any of this other crap. So that's the idea. The DNA parentage testing system that we're kind of proposing ensures that that's the case, that only captive bred parrots in this case, but it could be other birds in the future, can be exported. And that way we comply with CITES in the simplest possible way using, you know, the sensible technology. So that's the basic aim. And the aim is if you can open the borders up sensibly, both export and coming back the other way, import, then and do that in a way that's economical for, you know, I mean, you're not going to do it with one bird, but for people to get together and do a shipment now and then that is what will stop smuggling, and that is what will stop poaching. To do that, because it doesn't happen with other animals. It doesn't happen with dogs, cats, my understanding. Well, it probably doesn't on rare occasions, but it almost never happens because there's a sensible system for it to happen.
Any movie stars?
Sorry? Oh, that's right, unless you're the pirate bloke, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He gets away with it. Well, did he get away with it? I can't remember what happened in the end. Well, it certainly didn't jail him. The next one I've got, the Animal Welfare Act review in New South Wales. I actually met with, so this is an ACA initiative really. In terms of birds, we've let ACA take it on. Really positive meeting today. There's a discussion paper out. Everybody's welcome to put in a submission if you're that way inclined. Very, very positive meeting with the people, the Chief Animal Welfare Officer of New South Wales and a number of other people who are involved in rewriting that legislation. We were, I don't know if we were concerned, but it's interesting to note that there was consideration both by the Labor Party, everybody, even the government at the moment, even Adam Marshall, the Ag Minister, when I last met with him, there was real serious consideration of not having RSPCA as the inspectors underneath those animal welfare acts. The government, I guess the big one is the government. Well, it's not a huge one. It's no surprise, really. The government's decided that they will stick with RSPCA and Animal Welfare League as the inspectors in New South Wales still. So that's not, at this point in time, not going to change. ACA is organising meetings with all political parties, certainly with the Labor Party, shooters, fishers, and even our good friend Emma Hurst from the Animal Justice Party, but also the Minister's Office. We've just found out, for some reason, I don't know why, but Adam Marshall's Chief of Staff and a number of his senior staff are no longer working for him. There's a whole new office there underneath our Ag Minister in New South Wales. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, we'll touch base with them. So nothing major to report there. There's some issues that we had, but I won't go into the details of them. It's very early days with that. New South Wales licensing. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that Atticus had promised to, by the end of the week, and the end of the week I think was sort of the week that we had our meeting, get a draft of the regulation change to remove all the birds from licence, the common agricultural birds from licence. He committed in an email to me to do that by the end of that week. Clearly that hasn't happened, and we're talking, well, that was a month ago. So it was supposed to happen by the end of the week. That was a month ago. Mind you, he said a lot of things would happen by the end of the week that well over a year ago. So he hasn't done anything. So at the moment, what I'm intending to suggest to probably at the next Federation meeting is what I'll do is I'll actually email, because the Minister's Office is waiting for this. The Chief of Staff's still there. Yeah, this is the Environment Minister, Matt Keane. So I'm going to actually draft the regulation change, the wording, the whole lot, including because I said this to Atticus and I said it to, I think it's Christian, Matt Keane's Chief of Staff. I said, I'll draft it and I'll also draft all the ads to go out to inform agriculturists that it's happened. So I'm going to do that and send it to the Minister and say, look, I presume you've got all this because your head of National Parks, here's the email, told me that you would have. So here's our draft and here's the ads. And if we don't hear anything, well, we'll just put the ad out and say it's been done, or that it's, it's imminent, that this is what's happening, because that's what they keep telling us, that it's going to happen. They just don't do it. And maybe that'll sort of push them over the line. So that's, obviously I've got to talk to the Federation Committee about that, but that's my intention now, to kind of push it a little harder. I honestly do not know why they don't just do it now. It just gets quite absurd. Anyone got any questions on any of that, Guff? Nope. Okay. Update on online meetings. We did a few of the committee. So if I say anything here that the committee thinks I've got wrong, just yell out, please, because my memories have been a little flat out the last week or so. I believe in terms of the AGM, we sort of said that it's normally in September, but that we'll actually do it in October. Was that correct? Is that correct? Have I got that wrong? That's my memory. Nobody's saying anything. So I think that's the case. And then I might just jump to the Constitution. There's a draft. Is Don Finlater online here somewhere? Is Don there? I don't think so. If Don's there, please yell out. And again, if I've got this wrong, someone else yell out. I just mentioned it to Brian. Both Brian and I are a bit nutty in the head. He's probably had a few beers and I've had a couple of these. So I'm not 100% sure that what I'm saying here is completely correct. Certainly in the magazine that's coming out, there'll be a brief outline of the Constitution changes, because I know that Don's done that and Maddie was just about to send it to me. So that'll certainly be in there. We're not going to bother printing the whole revised Constitution and mailing that out to everyone. I just don't think that's necessary. If you want a mailed copy, there'll be an invitation to request that in the magazine. If you don't want a mail copy, well, you just click, whatever. There'll be a link. Go to the website and have a look at it. Read it online. If you got nothing, well, a lot of you got nothing else to do because you're in lockdown, I suppose. So maybe some of you will actually be interested to read it. From memory, there's no massively substantial changes in there. But if there is anything that grabs people, and certainly the changes that have been made, we can talk about at the September meeting, and then we have a formal vote at the October meeting as part of the AGM to accept or otherwise the edits to the Constitution. If there's other committee people there who think that I've just told some lies, can you speak up now or forever hold your peace? Because I'm not sure that that's 100% correct, but I think it is it not?
Yep, I confirm that's my understanding, and there'll be a brief summary of that in the next magazine that comes out, just explaining that. It won't be the full box and dice, but the link, I guess, will be there as well.
Very good. So now, if I have got that wrong, it's not just me, it's Brian's fault as well. How do I get rid of that?
We go down together, Sam.
We go down together, that's right. We die fighting. Now, let's go back to point 4, the price guide. The committee also spoke about that, and given that there's been no sales, no real indicators of any changes, Maddie emailed, I believe, all the other presidents, so Hawkesbury Club, Hunter, Wollongong, Canberra, might have forgotten somebody, all our affiliated clubs, and the other presidents all agreed too, so that we won't do a price guide this year. We'll put that one on hold till next year, and perhaps if things do get back to normal reasonably early, we'll try to do it a little bit earlier in the year once we work out what changes have happened. So you won't get a price guide. The next one.
Hang on, before you go, Sam.
Yep.
That price guide still applies. I've still got something like 20 odd copies of it, so I'll be sending them out to new members. And from the club's point of view, that price guide, although it says 2020, is still applicable.
Yep. Thank you, Brian. Now, this black-throated finch project, I'll get. I am helping with it, and Steve Sass, unfortunately, he's had a family member fall ill, and he won't be able to. He's not online to speak, but I'll speak to the project. But Simon Degenard's kindly come online, and he's gonna have a bit of at least introduce what the hell is this ASAP thing about. I'll just put a summary up, and then thank you, Simon.
Well, hello everyone. Yes, so basically ASAP came about as a result of a joint frustration between Sam and I. Having attended various meetings with governments and been involved in various conservation projects or following various conservation projects and having many discussions with many people, we came to the conclusion that we should start our own not-for-profit organisation with a view to supporting projects in the future and supporting the protecting the biodiversity of avian species, native avian species, not only in captivity in Australia, but also in the wild, with an interest in breeding in captivity, firstly. Also, when and where needed, release programs, not just for species that are gone, but species that are on the brink, which obviously would also involve the habitat side of things. So we know we need to have decent habitat that would support these birds if they were to be released. So we decided to start this simply because we've been banging our heads against the wall after every meeting we've had, every discussion we've had with government, and it seems that the only way we could move forward and get to a point where we can support projects and possibly run projects, help run projects, whatever the capacity may be needed. But the only way we could do this is to do it with a private organisation, and we wanted to do this as a not-for-profit, and that's how ASAP, which is was born. We feel there's a need for it, and we feel that Sam and I have the appropriate expertise and knowledge and contacts to actually make a difference going forward. And obviously, we would like the support of everybody in aviculture. I mean, it's not it's born out of our love for avian species and for our desire to see them conserved both in captivity and in the wild.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well said. Yeah, I agree. Obviously, 100%. So yeah, so technically, it's a company limited by guarantee. And the guarantee basically says that this is not for profit, that it is a charity. It's registered with the Australian, with the AC, as an ACNC, registered charity. We've got, don't have to pay tax, all that kind of stuff. We will apply, and it's only really relevant if people want to make large donations, but there is the possibility of some large donations coming in. We will apply for God, I can't remember what the acronym is now, but at the Commonwealth level, so that you can claim money donated as a tax deduction, which obviously is significant if you get some major commercial people to donate, which is on the cards. There's a few that are interested already, but certainly we're looking for donations. But we're not looking for the FSA to donate anything at the moment, and we're also looking at this as a long-term thing. So, for instance, the coconut fibre that you may or may not have seen, because we've been in bloody lockdown for so long, I organised on behalf of ASAP to import a tonne of coconut fibre from Sri Lanka, which we've done. And we're now, we're doing this slowly and steadily and want it to be established long-term. So that coconut fibre is now for sale. And all the profits from that, for nesting material, for siskins and canaries and so on, and it's being sold obviously through the FSA sales table, and I'll go and have some meetings with all the various wholesalers of pet stuff that sell through to pet stores to get it stocked by them. We've got a few other ideas for a number of other products that are missing in Australia. That we'll also either import if they're needed or have them produced locally. There's a few ideas made out of eucalyptus and so on, and gum nuts and whatever, perhaps for parrots that we can commercialise and do in sort of wholesale quantities. Really, we're looking to be the wholesaler to sell on to retailers, or in the case of the pet industry, there are sort of middlemen who I guess supply the pet stores directly, and the wholesalers supply them. So there's a number of levels going on in the wider pet industry. So we're looking at that. But once we've sort of got some money, we'll then be looking to, obviously work out, well, what are we going to do with it? Some projects we'd run ourselves. Other projects will support other activities that are already going on. I mean, perhaps stuff that, Save the Gouldian Fund's doing, and, and various other projects around Australia and perhaps internationally as well. But the one that I'm going to talk about, or that Steve Sass was going to talk about tonight, is for the black-throated finch. So I'll just see if I can make that come up. Here we go. You see that? I'm using a Mac laptop here, and I confess I'm not a Mac person. So if things look weird, that's my excuse.
Did David have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I did. Look, and you might cover that. Just point A. I mean, you've got 4 great goals there. To me, it seems like it'd be pretty tricky to reintroduce birds into the wild because of the regulations that exist. Is that something that's already been just thought through, or is that something you're aiming for and will work it out as you go along?
I mean, for me, it's, I guess, we know there are these hurdles, and we have spoken about this stuff with various government representatives and banged our head against the wall. So I guess we're looking at it from a perspective of, let's set ourselves up with the possibility of doing this. And I mean, that also means first having viable populations kept in captivity, but then hoping that we can have these discussions and show that we have the ability to do this, pushing through to have certain rules change, or for them to see that we can do it and allow us to give it a go. I mean, it's not going to happen if we wait for the government to do it, is what I feel.
Yeah, can I just add, David, I guess you're talking about, assuming that this is reintroducing, and it is this as well, birds that we bred in captivity, like the black-throated finch, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and perhaps it is. But this is also translocation too, which is done quite, isn't it? So moving wild birds from one location to another to re-establish them in an area where they once were. So which I don't think is, well, it's being done, isn't it, with other species? So that's not controversial, but I agree with you. At the moment, you wouldn't get looked at kindly by the authorities if you went and released 100 black-throated finches or 1,000 or something at Inverell, for instance. Somebody would go off their brain if you just did that. But maybe it's a sensible thing to do. I don't know. But, yes, which is, I guess, what you're getting at, correct?
Yeah.
But maybe the time's right, because look at that Bilby project that they're running across the media at the moment. They've introduced them from somewhere, and there was none there before, and they reckon there's going to be 1,000 of them in
indeed
12 months.
Yeah. Although, anyway, it's not impossible, but yeah, not easy.
There could be a 5th one there, and that's to as in goal.
Yeah.
Getting ASAP and partners to work together towards the top 4 there.
Oh,
so
certainly.
Working in conjunction. I mean, ultimately you don't want to do it on your own, and the more partners, the better. But that could be something you might want to consider in terms of describing the role.
Indeed. To be perfectly honest, these 4, when I sat down with my accountant to put this together, to make sure that when it was submitted, it would tick all the boxes to be a designated gift recipient, DGR, that's the term I couldn't think of before, for the Commonwealth. So you get the tax deduction, and to get the tax-free status, and to get the GST exemption and all that crap. We reworded what other charities who'd been successful had done to suit our needs. So that was crazy as it sounds, as important in terms of the objects as what they actually say. It's more stupid bureaucratic bullshit, isn't it? Really, but that was a reality. But I accept what you're saying, and we clearly
and one more thing, probably
everyone. That's absolutely critical.
Yeah, probably a 6th one too, something about scientific research and collating information and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Certainly.
Yeah, so I've just written collaboration science.
That's it.
Yeah. No, 100%. And the thing is that, I mean, neither Sam or I know everything, and none of us do. So we need to collaborate, and we want to work together. And we're not doing this like it's just from our passion. I mean, the passion drives us. So we want to bring as many people together to support this stuff as possible. And at the end of the day, it might also be that we find, okay, there's a little project happening over here. We're going to funnel some money that way, and they're going to do their project, and we're just going to help them fund it.
Yeah, we're going to basically, I guess, as passionate as we are about the projects themselves, we're just going to try and get the money. You know, get the money, and then have somebody else come up with the super ideas and come to us, and we'll go, that's awesome, we're in. You know, we'll get you started, and we'll like run the GoFundMe, and we'll, you know, we've got a bit of an income stream already. You know, that I guess is the kind of the overall sort of aim. Although these things are, you know, what we're hoping people will come to us with, I suppose. Yeah, that's my intention anyway.
Yeah.
Well, like, any other questions about ASAP before I get onto the?
Do you guys? I mean, congratulations on the initiative. I think it's great. But do you have an actual charter of how you're actually going to do these things? Because one of the biggest problems with aviculture is record keeping, and if you're going to try and preserve species and look at introduction to the wild, the first thing they're going to ask you is, you know, what data do you have on relatedness and you know, where birds have come from, what the records are, all the rest, and we're hopeless at it. Let's be honest. As a hobby, the racing pigeon guys are usually better, but you know, so how are you going to actually achieve each of these aims in terms of the actual activities you're going to do? Have you worked that out yet, or are you still that's still to come?
It is still to come. You're right, and as you well know, Stacey, I completely agree with you. And I mean, even in terms of FSA, with our, for instance, we did that, what's still officially going, that strawberry finch project,
yeah.
and that certainly taught me that, boy, we really are bad at record keeping, because the people who had them, you know, and I'm talking, you know, had 2 pairs or something, and we had one person looking after, you know, the record keeping. To be perfectly honest, it was a complete disaster in terms of record keeping, and that was a very small project with only a few people and very competent breeders involved, and we couldn't do it. So it is a major problem. But I guess what I'm saying is it's sort of, yes, it is our problem, but that's why people need to be like there needs to be funds if things are going to work long term. Because the problem with that one as well was, well, no one's being paid; it's all voluntary. So yes, people are happy to do it. So I'll just let somebody's wanting to come in. Yes, people want to do it, but I think realistically, once they've done it for 1, 2, 3 years, and maybe Gary Fitt can comment on the Silverbill project, you know, a lot of people have just had enough of it, you know. And these sort of projects, if they're going to work, you know, they've got to go for a decade or more, you know, at least. So if you can sort of supply people and even pay them something, or, you know, for their time, or at least reimburse them something, there's some incentive, you know, a financial incentive for it to continue as well. So I guess that's a big part of why we're looking at doing it this way too. To sort of get some money in the bank first, and then look at the projects. Although the first project that we're going to do, this blackthroat one, we don't actually have the money in the bank yet to do it all. That's the reality. So I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here. But let me get onto this, and by all means interrupt and go back to the ASAP stuff if you wish. So this project, although ASAP is going to, in a financial sense, control the money in and out and that side of it, it's essentially being run by EnviroKey, which is Steve Sass's company. So it's Steve Sass, I guess, came to me and Simon and said, listen, why don't we do this? So the general idea, and this will be in the magazine as well, so you can read it. And Steve, as I say, sent his apologies. He was going to come on and run through all this. So as most of you would well know, the black-throated finch has become famous for all the wrong reasons over the years, particularly with certain coal mining development in central Queensland. But in New South Wales, it is presumed extinct. Well, he's written presumed extinct. Officially, it is extinct in the wild in New South Wales. And I guess what we're saying, well, is that actually the case? Is that actually the case? Now, so what we want to do is have, and this is, look, probably they're not going to find any, is the reality, right? But so it's as much a public awareness activity as anything else, to raise awareness in the areas, centred on Inverell, but that whole area. And I spoke to Gary Fed earlier that, it also includes parts of southern Queensland as well, certainly goes up to the border and beyond, and down to probably sort of Tamworth, maybe Gunnedah included as well. If you imagine that kind of a ellipse around there, that's basically where they were found. And we'll get on to councils and schools and things like that. And it's kind of a, can you try and find this bird, basically? Here's what they look like, here's here's the habitat that they're normally found in. When you're out, riding your bike around the paddock or whatever, or driving your tractor or wherever you are, going to the park or something, look out for these little guys and let's see if we can find them. So I guess that's the first step, which is really about raising awareness of these little guys. If they find them, brilliant. If they find populations, happy days. But in a sense, that doesn't matter so much whether they find them or not. And then at the same time, we'll start a GoFundMe so that people can donate to this. And the aim is really to, we'll change this a little bit. It's not just to buy motion activated cameras. It's for the project. But obviously, if somebody thinks that they've spotted one, or a lot of the time, and maybe Gary can jump in here. He relayed some examples where people say they have, and he drives miles and miles and finds that they're double bars or something. But we've got some motion activated cameras that we can put in those locations and try to confirm what it is they're saying. And Steve and his environmental consultants at EnviroKey, there are systems for doing this. He's done it before in similar projects to this. The sort of finder, I can't remember. Do you remember the species of goanna? It was some sort of.
Oh yeah, I do forget the name, but
most recently that was critically endangered, and I mean it was to my mind anyway a lot more difficult. It looked the same as a lot of other goannas to me, but I'm not a reptile person. Whereas how you could think a double bar was a black-throated finch blows my mind, but if you're not a bird person, I guess you can. To set up those cameras and do that for a reasonable amount of time, this will probably be a 12 months or more to do that, and enroll councils and so on in that, get the community in those areas interested. Then maybe later on, we move on to some other stages. And possibly that would next stage might be setting up some aviaries in schools that have shown an interest based on this part of the project. So we might set up some aviaries and get them breeding some black-throated finches within their schools. So we'd sort of fund the aviaries and and support them. Find some local aviculturists to go and help feed and talk to the kids and all this sort of stuff. Set up that, and then maybe sometime in the future, assuming that the things are extinct and we don't find any, then build some much larger aviaries to do the sort of stuff that I've spoken about, where we would actually breed, a generation or so in these large aviaries, and then do some sort of slow release and do it. But I'm not saying we just let them go and see what happens. That itself would be just a pilot to see, well, what happens. What is it? Because nobody at this stage actually knows why the birds are extinct. All the locals that I've spoken to have sort of said, well, hang on, there's still plumheads and double bars and whatever else, they're still there. It's not clear really what's changed in much of that habitat that's meant that there's no blackthroats, and yet there's a lot of other grass finches there. So maybe those sort of, that will let us know, because whether it fails, if it's successful, happy day. If it's not successful, we learn from that too. We work out why it wasn't, but that's a long way down the track. So this is the first part of it. And tonight, we're not asking FSA at this stage to donate any money or anything. We're just asking FSA to put its name to the project and to be a sort of partner with us, I guess. Does that mean that anybody's got to actually do anything at this stage? No, just get the word out and just support it, I guess is the aim. Now, obviously, once we get cracking and we determine what we want, we might ask for you know, like we have for other projects, you know, some of $1,000 or something, you know, some amount of money. But that's not what we're doing at the moment. We're just asking for the support of the Finch Society of Australia, and I guess permission to put the logo on something like this that you're seeing in front of you now. So can
this isn't going out to anyone at this stage. So they know, yeah, we've got the logo there, but just to show people what it, you know, an example of what may go out to organisations.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. This, you know, assuming that people don't yell and scream at me in the next 5 minutes, I'll put a copy of this in the magazine. Has anyone got any questions? Anyone want to make any comments or?
To me, Sam, it seems something that the club should support, but I would ask anyone who's listening, are they aware of any issues that might be confronted by the club if it supports such a project?
The only potential issue I see, and I don't want you guys to take this the wrong way, is because you're also pushing for the export and import of birds, and then you're proposing this, some people may take it as a conflict of interest potentially, or having a hidden agenda, and I don't know how we would address that. That's all.
I can put my hand up here and say, you know what, I've been asked by the government to comment on this stuff continuously, and I've indicated I've got no interest going forward. I've banged my head against the wall. Yeah. I don't have any interest in discussing, going to meetings. To be honest, import, export has zero interest to me now, and for obvious reasons probably. And I'm not in any way involved in those meetings personally. I've got a life outside of birds, and I'm focusing on that as well. Yeah. And my passion for conservation still burns strong. And personally, I just want to do what I can. I'm not going to sort of sit down and bury my head because others might have something negative to say about me personally or anything else.
Oh, it wasn't. It's not even a personal thing, obviously, Simon. It's just I'm trying to look at how.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Look at it. Yeah.
I mean, Sam and I have had these discussions at length, you know, but I could either, you know, I mean, and I'm going to be open and honest here. I could have said, you know, bugger it, I'm out. I'm going to go and play golf and cricket and not even focus on this stuff. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't cross my mind at certain points. But my passion for birds is there. It's not going to die. I feel that I've put the runs on the board with many things that I've done, and I feel that I've achieved a great deal in aviculture, in the sharing of information, and I don't want all that to be for nothing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and there's no doubt Simon's got it still does have contacts both within government and elsewhere around the world, of course, in terms of a lot of these kind of threatened species projects. So I absolutely value that knowledge and that expertise that he's got. In terms of the imports and exports, I don't think the two things are related at all. My work on that is as in my role as the president of the Canary and Cage Bird Federation of Australia. So when I talk about the meetings that I'm attending for exports, that is, and I made it quite clear to the consultants that interviewed me. Was it late last week? I think it was late last week.
Yeah.
That is in that role representing, and we have it. I mean, anyone can come as a observer to any federation meeting. Over many years that I've been president, we have formulated our policy in regard to export, and it's basically, you know, it's a bit more detailed, obviously, than what I've expressed in these meetings. But that is the policy of 240 bird clubs throughout Australia. I accept that there are people who don't agree with that policy. I accept that, but they are not representing any of those 240 clubs when they say that. And I make that quite clear to government, and also, and it's not related to this stuff at all. But I accept your point, Stacey, that there are certain people who may, you know, look, they'll see a conspiracy anyway, won't they?
Yeah, that's true. I
don't guess that shit, to be honest.
I would rather raise it now and you guys
Yeah.
have already thought it through, then
Yeah.
people sniping at you later. That's all.
But by the way, are you vaccinated or what?
I am.
He must be because he hasn't got a tin hat on.
What about you, Simon?
Yeah, I had my second jab last Friday, so
Very good.
or Thursday actually.
So
I only have the starting of a second head growing in.
can I bring the meeting back to order? We haven't got our Lord and Master here tonight.
You need a curly wig and a mallet.
I do. Yeah. Can I then just to finish off this, unless there's someone else who wants to interrupt me? Oh, in fact, Gary Fitt might want to give us a little bit of a background on what's going on with black-throated finches. But before we do that, can I just move a motion then that the FSA support the Help to Find the Black-throated Finch project, including use of logo? Would someone like to second that?
I'll second it.
Yep.
Thank you. And if you're against, yell out now. Stephen Fish, what do you want? You're not against, surely.
I'm against.
Bloody Justin, shut up.
No, my mistake. I'm for it.
Now, the other thing I was going to say is we should. Did you know that Justin Georgopoulos is on his arse at the moment with the COVID restrictions? His cafe is about to shut down, so although we can't donate to the help the find the black-throated finch, or we're not asking for donations to that, I'm sure that you'd welcome donations, wouldn't you, Justin? To the
You're muted,
Justin.
Justin.
Justin Georgopoulos out of the gutter campaign.
Yeah, that's it.
Why, isn't he?
Any endorsements would be lovely. Yeah.
Well, I think I declare that carried, and perhaps I don't know, Gary. Do you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah. So yes, there's a lot of interest in the black-throat, obviously in Queensland still. There is. I think you shouldn't underestimate the amount of observations that birders have been making over the last 20 years. That the black-throat recovery team rely on all the records in eBird and bird data that essentially confirm the absence of black-throats from New South Wales and southern Queensland. At the same time, we've had in the last year 2 claimed observations of black-throats in southern Queensland, one near Cunningham's Gap, a group of 20 black-throats observed by someone who apparently knows finches. And just a couple of weeks ago, I got another observation from, again, someone who is a finch breeder who claims to have seen black-throats just on the edge of Warwick. Now, the recovery team is investigating both of those. Unfortunately, it's, by the time you get to any of these locations, the likelihood of seeing any birds is pretty small. Over the years, we've had a lot of reports of black-throats. So I've investigated several west of Ipswich where people have claimed to have seen them on roadsides. I've investigated some. The most recent one was in Ipswich, which is the one that Sam mentioned. They were double bars, and I can't imagine how they thought they were black-throats. There's been claims of black-throats around and south of Rockhampton many times, and all of those have turned out to be chestnuts. So there are a lot of people who are looking for black-throats in the birding community and not finding them. But that's not a reason to do this sort of thing and try to engage the public more broadly in at least being aware of black-throats and where they used to be.
Yeah.
I certainly think this initiative should include southern Queensland, particularly that border area. If there are black-throats still around, that might be where they are.
Sorry to interrupt, and we'll certainly do that, Gary. So the in New South Wales bit will disappear.
What in
we'll
New South
those-
Wales and
those
southern
Queensland
Queensland when Anastasia will allow us.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll certainly include those councils in.
We have to get a permit to come into New South Wales.
Yeah, well, that's understandable.
I can't imagine why we'd want to. Anyway.
No, but we need.
Next year we're going to make it a requirement. If you want to come to Queensland, you've got to get a permit. Come from Queensland to New South Wales.
Well,
It is now. Yeah.
Is that a movement order?
Yeah, you just got rid of them.
Permanent, mate.
They've been reinstated for people now.
No, but for sure, we need to include that area. We need to include the whole area that they are known to have existed in the past. And I mean, like Sam said, for me, a really interesting point is the other species are still there. So where's the difference for the black throat?
Yeah, but not all finches are the same. Like
no, of course. So it'd be just interesting to identify what is that something that has caused this decline. If we can.
There is some information on feeding preferences on grasses, and native grasses have been replaced.
Yeah.
There are changes that have happened, perhaps slowly, that people don't recognise.
Yeah, right.
The decline in the black throat from northern New South Wales and its contraction up to where it currently is has happened over about 40 years.
Yeah, right.
And to try and restore some of those habitats would be a very expensive activity. So anyway, it's not a reason to not try and do something.
And it's not clear what it is that you'd actually do to restore them. So, from what I've read, that's not.
Well, restoring certain native grasses and not having complete ground cover is one of the things. Like blackthroats only feed on the ground.
Yeah.
They need open space between plants to feed on pollen seed.
Yeah.
And they need certain types of seed. So one of the most recent students out of JCU who's worked on feeding preferences of blackthroats has shown that their preferences are somewhat different to other finches. So anyway, that's all by the by. And we could talk about blackthroats for the whole meeting, but we've got a speaker to listen to. But there's, pretty devastating activity going on in central Queensland at the moment around Adani.
Yeah, right.
You might have seen the headlines of the report that Adani released in May showing an 80% decline of blackthroats on the Adani lease. And the government didn't respond to that at all. Everyone else was appalled, and Adani simply said, it's just an observation, it's not a population estimate. And when you read the report, the techniques that the consultants have used to try and monitor blackthroat abundance are really deplorable.
Yeah, right.
So it's pretty depressing what's going on in Queensland, I'd have to say.
And it's shocking that even for that Adani lease, with all the publicity that it's got and all the bad press that it's got, specifically over blackthroats, that there is still no sort of government, substantial sort of verification of what it is that they're doing and how they're, ensuring that the blackthroats don't drop in number,
Exactly.
Seems absolutely unbelievable to my mind. I do a lot of work with coal mining in this area, and we find the same thing there, that there's a lot of, all these conditions to the approvals, but it's all self-regulated.
Yep.
The mines regulate it and let the government know when they've exceeded the standards or whatever it is, gone outside the approval conditions. That's how it works. Nobody from government is actually coming in and verifying that they're actually doing it correctly. And it sounds a little bit like it's the same thing up there too in Queensland.
Well, it's self-regulation, Sam.
Yes. Regulation, you have Clayton's regulation. Regulation you have when you don't have a regulation. Anyway, thank you very much. We might, unless anyone's got any desperate other comments about black-throated finches, we should move on. What else? Did I get through everything on the agenda, first of all? Well, that's good. Other business. Anyone got anything else they'd like to bring up? Excellent. So that's the main part of the meeting over. And I'll now welcome, thanks, Stacey, our infamous vet, another bloody Queenslander now, aren't you, mate?
Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm so infamous.
Taking over our meeting tonight, aren't they? Thank you very much, Stacey, for you're able to share your screen, I hope.
I will in a second. Yep, do that.
Just because we live in Queensland doesn't mean we're Queenslanders.
Yeah, true.
Right.
I like your spirit there. You know that the Rabbitohs and everything. I do. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Simon.
Yes.
So I've accompanied Ian on a lot of storm thrashings of of the Rabbitohs. So
Yeah, but
whatever.
Is this your new place that we're seeing here, Stacey?
Yeah, this is something I just set up the other day.
Jeez, things have worked out for you.
Yeah, it's good to see everyone actually, and in this times of COVID lockdown, it's been challenging on everyone. But one of the good, I guess, results of it is a lot of people have been busy building aviaries, and everyone's got their own ideas on what they want out of an aviary. But I just thought I'd put some of those thoughts here, and I've been one of those people as well, with the help of Ian Brown, who's in the audience at the moment. And so we often see these fancy aviaries at bird parks or zoos, or we've visited or seen them online, and we all dream of that's what we'd like to have at some stage, but obviously finances and space are limiting. And so the reality is that this is what we kind of start off with, the old Absco or Steel Chief or equivalent aviary, and they perform the basic functions of an aviary. They help protect the birds from a lot of the weather conditions, only open at the front, and a lot of people use them very successfully and do very well with these sorts of aviaries. But they also have several shortcomings as well, one being there's no safety door, so the risk of birds escaping when you open the door is always there. They're not insulated, so if they're in direct sunlight they can get very hot. And if you live in a very windy area, they can also, be blown away. And there's been a few sad stories of that over the years. But by and large, they still perform the task that they're designed for. But there's a lot of levels in between these two extremes, and they're the sorts of things I guess I want to talk about. And for anyone that's thinking of building some aviaries, just some things to go through in their heads. So the first thing is, well, what are your aims with your aviary, and what are you trying to achieve? And obviously the first one is to keep birds in. That seems fairly obvious, but you've got to construct it in a way that the birds don't accidentally escape and can be kept in, and we can keep the vermin and predators out. And this second one is probably a lot more problematic, and a lot of people struggle with this, but I believe with the right design and the right construction and detail and attention to detail, you can eliminate these risks, or at least severely minimize them anyway. The other thing that never got thought of, but we do think about now because we all live busy lives, is making your daily management easier and quicker. And that's about feeding methods and cleaning methods that make bird keeping easy, and also the way you can catch birds and deal with them daily. And you also need to keep them in the best health. And so although the big open planted aviary is really good, it does come with some compromises. And at the other extreme, you can keep a bird totally indoors, totally protected from every environmental condition in fairly sterile conditions, which will maximize health, but you're compromising on other things, which may include, access to direct sunlight, plants, and the behavioral advantages of having that sort of environment, which can make bird keeping interesting, and particularly with finches, which makes them more interesting than, say, parrots, which often will sit around for large parts of the day not doing much, and that's basically partly their habit, but also partly the way they're kept. So there's a medium in between. And for most of us, breeding birds is really important. I, for one, don't really get a kick out of just sitting and looking at a bird all day. I want it to do something. And I like the breeding behaviour and everything that it entails. And I think most of us are the same. So we need to keep that in mind when we're doing it. So Simon probably recognises these photos. And this is, you know, a really great facility in Germany that breeds several endangered species. And they have a totally inside facility area, enclosed section with a peephole, which is common in Europe because of the cold weather conditions, and then they're allowed outside. You notice there's lots of enrichment in there, lots of plant vegetation for these Queen of Bavaria conures. And when you get to even, you know, rarer species, you know, it's very important that you maximise the advantages and minimise the risks to the birds involved, because you just can't go out and get another one. So every individual counts. So you don't want to have losses. You want to maximise breeding. So aviary design is very important in that. So what are some of the planning considerations you need to keep in mind? Well, what do you want to keep? Because obviously different species have different requirements. Hyacinth macaw is going to need a totally different setup to a violet-eared waxbill. And even within finches, which is mainly what most people are interested in tonight, there's a big difference between, say, the requirements of a weaver to the requirements of a seron type species to the requirements of grass finches. So you might design aviaries appropriately. How many do you want to keep? Do you want to keep a mixed collection altogether? Or do you want individual pairs? Do you want to breed lots of species or keep lots of species, or just a few? Do you know how many you want to keep now, and how many do you want to keep in a few years' time? Well, things you have to work with. And then most of us are limited by where we live, and there's a certain area where the aviary can go, and the site and orientation of the aviary can make a big difference to the number of problems we have, and that mainly relates to weather conditions. And what we're trying to do is protect birds from inclement weather and maximising their exposure to sunlight for as much a part of the day as possible, and also maximising drainage within the aviary, so because wet floors can create so many problems. And then there's aviary types, conventionals versus suspendeds. I guess this is more an issue for parrot blokes, but we do see that suspendeds are being increasingly used for finches, and a suspended aviary is just basically one that has a raised mesh floor where all the droppings and seed and everything else can fall through, and the birds can't get access to it. So there are obvious health advantages to that. But some of the disadvantages, it can be difficult to keep plants in them, although you can in pots, or you can hang them around the sides. We'll go into that a bit more later. And you can also keep more birds in a smaller area, so they're quite popular. Then there's the materials. What are you comfortable using, and what sort of look do you want? You know, is it a timber or a metal type aviary? What sort of cladding are you going to use? Do you want it to harmonise with your garden and your house, or you don't care, you just want something that's economical and does the job? They're all things you have to think about. What are you going to put on the floor? We're always balancing interesting substrates that the birds enjoy foraging through and can feed through versus disease risk. And basically you want whatever substrate you choose, you want it to drain really well and remain dry for as long as possible, because moist floors are always the more likely to create a problem than dry floors. Excuse me. Aesthetics, the look of an aviary can be important. Like I said, for some of us, it's more a practicality. We just build cages to house the birds. The looks aren't important. For some of us, there are other factors, which may include other people in the family who may influence or have requirements that the aviaries don't look like an eyesore, but actually look quite attractive. And then future proofing is just about planning what you're going to do with young birds or more species you might want to keep. You may just be beginning in birds and build a single aviary, but you may quickly find that you're really enjoying this and you want to build more aviaries. Or what do you do with all the youngsters you've bred? So you need to allow for where the additional aviaries are going to go. On the other hand, you don't want to over plan and build too big a complex too quickly, because it can become very overwhelming and you feel like you're just working all the time and not enjoying the birds. So you need to sort of think ahead. So allow the flexibility to extend as much as you need to, but perhaps don't do it as quickly as you may want to initially. And value adding to property, this is a one, I think Peter Phippen mentioned it many years ago. Being a real estate agent, he was saying that most Averys actually devalue your property. So if you go to sell your house and you've got a bunch of Averys, most of the real estate agents tell you to get rid of the Averys first and then put it on the market. I don't think it matters these days. As long as you've got a block of land, it'll sell. But it's something to think about. And so building a type of Avery that actually adds to the property can be a good idea. And in my case, for example, I'm on a couple of acres here. There was no shedding on the property. So I got a shed built first that's council approved. And then I've built Averys off that. And the idea is if I ever sell it, I just pull the Averys down, but the shed remains and it's a value added asset to the property rather than something that's going to detract from it. Well, that's the idea anyway. And finally, that dirty word, the dollar. We don't all have unlimited budgets, which would be really nice. We had a few million to build like an Avery like that first photo. But you can be resourceful and you can sort of budget to whatever your limits are. And there's nothing wrong with building an Avery out of secondhand materials. It's just the way you build it that's important, not what you use. And attention to detail, and that's what I was getting at before. Taking shortcuts inevitably will end up biting you on the backside and cause a lot of management issues and eventually loss of birds. And just overall take away from the attraction. It'll start becoming a chore if you don't do things right from the beginning. So I'm a real stickler. Plan it. Think of all the potential problems that can happen. Try and allow for those. Plan around those. And then when you're actually building it, make sure you don't take any shortcuts. So what sort of layout you're going to have and all these considerations are important. So you're going to have your breeding Averys, but don't forget to also build some Averys to hold your excess birds or new birds you may be bringing into the collection and looking at establishing for new species. And safety walkways, I think, are worth their weight in gold. It only takes an accidental loss of 1 or 2 birds to pay for the cost of a walkway, and just having that peace of mind just decreases the stress every time you open the Avery door. So having 2 or 3 doors between the birds and the outside world is always a great idea. The Avery compound concept I'll discuss a little bit later, but it's basically about the footprint that the whole Avery is going to take. And then you can, if you do that right and you rodent proof that and you build it the right way, then whatever you put inside that compound can vary. That doesn't matter. The detail doesn't matter then because you've got an area that's totally protected from either the elements or vermin or predators. And you can keep within that compound. It could be something made out of quarter inch mesh for the tiniest wren to keeping a large macaw if you want to in the same compound. But once you've got that compound built the right way, then you're free to use whatever materials inside and to lay it out any way you want to. Don't forget a bird room because it's very handy to have all your materials close by, whether it's food, storage, whether it's a water supply, nest boxes, and other materials you might need. So a bird room is really handy, and planning that from the beginning is a lot easier. And within that, you may have a quarantine facility, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it needs to be somewhere where you can put new birds and just watch them for a while and make sure they're healthy and give them some of the preventative treatments before it goes into your collection, because it's easier to deal with it in quarantine than it is in your open Avery. And then we all need a hospital cage of some sort, because invariably, you've got live birds, you're going to have sick birds and dead birds potentially. So don't forget to allow an area for that. Storage is important. And if you're into some of the parrot type species, are you going to go into incubation and hand rearing? Where are you going to do that? And ideally, you want your incubator in a separate room to your hand rearing room, so there's no cross-contamination. And also give thought to where you're going to put your feeders, your water dishes, and your nesting facilities in the Avery before you build it, so you don't put perches over feeders and waterers, which create massive issues, or the nesting facilities are overhanging those sort of areas. So try and think of the layout in just drawing it on paper before you actually start building anything. So these are the conventional walk-in type Averys that were the norm years ago, and still is for a lot of us, particularly if you're keeping finches or softbills. And I guess the major difference between these two is that the one on the left is an open type Avery with a dirt floor, allows sun and rain to get in. but also means that any parasites that get in there can survive very well. So that's something you have to think about. And in those sort of situations, drainage is critical. There's also no safety walkway on that aviary, which may not matter because of the size of it. Most birds get away, but I still feel more comfortable having one. And the one on the right is fully roofed, appears to have a concrete floor. So it's a bit more sterile, but it has the advantage that you're probably going to have less issues with moisture on the floor, although you still can, we all know that horizontal rain happens and water dishes and feed dishes, particularly feed dishes, can get wet and floors can get quite wet. So you still need to allow for drainage in those sort of aviaries. And some of you might recognise this setup. This is just one of the nicer walk-in planted aviaries. These belong to Tony Ford in orange. And yeah, they can be landscaped and that's why they're attractive, because the birds can interact with their environment. They look fantastic. There's some of the suspended aviaries. My main criticism with suspended aviaries is they're often too small, and not so much for finches, but for a lot of the parrots, they're minimal size, they're not maximum size, and that's fine for a season or two. And in fact, many species breed better in those sort of aviaries because you never enter their territory. And from a hygiene point of view, all the debris falls through to the bottom. But on the downside, they're not exercising, they're crawling around everywhere. So they lose fitness over time. And also they tend to be very sparse. And so the birds don't have a lot to do. So what can happen is pairs can deteriorate over several years. So they may breed really well for the first few years and then start to play up, not feed youngsters, smash eggs, attack the female or attack the babies more. And I think if you're running into those sort of situations in a suspended type setup, you may be worth getting those birds out and flying them into a large flight aviary for a while, just to give them exercise, to mix with some other birds and just mix things up a bit and get them out of their little enclosure that they're used to. And then they can sometimes be paired up after a few months, fitter, mentally reinvigorated, if you like, and they can then resume and often don't do the same behavioural stuff that they used to. So it can make quite a difference. So just be aware of that. But there's no reason why you can't make suspendeds larger and give the birds more exercise. There's no reason why you can't put foliage from branches in for those sorts of birds. And I should have put a photo here of an aviculturist down in Melbourne, who a lot of you may know, who's built probably the best looking suspended aviaries I've ever seen, and they're for finches. And he breeds some very rare finches really well in these suspendeds, but they're beautifully built. And I'll let him give the talk, because I think he's going to it at the next conference, the next Finches conference, whenever that happens. But his setup is really nice. And these are ones that are just fed through the front. There's a walkway at the back. These sliding feeders that Brad Backer was making, but I don't think they're making them anymore, are they? Thompson's feeders. I think they've gone out of business. Their website's down. Do you know anything, Simon, about that? Simon's not. Anyway, they make these beautiful aluminium sliding feeders with stainless steel dishes, and yeah, they're really neat little units.
I believe they're still making them.
Are they? Well, the website's down, and you can't order anything off the website at all.
Yeah.
So
Probably because Barry looks after it, and Barry's been quite ill.
Okay.
Whereas Brad does the work in terms of making them. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good. I'm glad they're still around. And this is the compromise. This is a conventional walk-in aviary with a suspended porch, which incorporates the best of both features. So the birds can get out in the rain and the sun, but they don't get wet floors there, and things just fall through. They still can have direct access to wild birds, and don't underestimate the problems that can cause. Wild parrots visiting your parrots, or even wild finches visiting your finches, can, well, you lose control of what's going on, and they can introduce problems to your birds, and there have been outbreaks associated in several species with contact with wild birds, outbreaks of disease and losses. So just be aware of that as well. But the concept is a good one. And this is a big parrot breeding facility overseas. They have it's a part of a bird park. There's Loro Park. They have two off facility breeding centres, which are massive, you can see. And the main difference between the two complexes is the thickness of the shade cloth. And so one is for neotropical species that live in rainforests, so they have a heavier gauge shade cloth over the whole complex. And the other one is for open country birds like Australian birds and African birds that have more sunlight exposure. And so that has a thinner gauge shade cloth, but it's all, you know, protected, I guess. And then there are suspended aviaries, all separated by distance as well, landscaped around them for individual breeding pairs. And the results here are, you know, generally quite good. And this is out of Stan Sindle's book on cockatoos, Australian cockatoos. And the main reason I took this photo is to expand on that aviary complex theme that I mentioned earlier. So the main aviaries are in the middle here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these are the main aviaries. The walkway's behind. This is the shelter section. This is the flight section. And then there's an area right at the front which has a visual screen all the way around, but which you can plant and landscape. And the beauty of that is the birds get protection from predators from the front of the aviary, because that's often one of the issues we have, even as finch keepers or parrot keepers. You're getting, could be noisy miners, or it could be owls, or it could be, you know, any sort of predator hanging on the front wire and attacking birds through the wire. If you're having that wire separated by distance from the front of the aviary, then the birds are pretty secure. It also provides a bit of mental security for a lot of species, and some where you think they can look out onto a big open area and they like it, they don't breed, and then you cover the front and give them privacy, and all of a sudden they start breeding again. It also can double up as an area where you can free fly birds. So if pairs are getting either too sedentary or too familiar, or you just want to break things up, or at the end of the breeding season, bring all birds with youngsters together to form crashing, particularly with some of the parrots, then you can fly them into this open area here, and they can interact socially as well during the non-breeding season, and it can work really well. And if they chew the vegetation, well, it can also grow back next year. So that's a concept I'm quite keen on. And indoor bird rooms pose different problems. Obviously, security is not so much of an issue, whether it's from predators or thieves, but it's more airflow. Ventilation is the big issue with internal flights, and also getting UV and direct sunlight. Because don't forget that sunlight coming through a window still gets the UV filtered, so they're not going to get their UV requirements from through a window. They need direct sunlight. They don't need a lot of it, but they need some. So then you're reliant on vitamin D either through the food or through those full spectrum lamps, which may or may not do what you think they do. There's a lot of debate about those. There's a lot of problems with them. And some of them don't even give off any UV light at all, even though they appear to be working. So you need to test them and change them regularly. But there's some of the issues you need to think about when you've got an indoor type aviary. But the advantage is you can service them any time of the year, day or night. If you put in automated lighting systems, you can fit it in with your lifestyle. And it doesn't matter if it's raining outside or stinking hot, you can keep a more controlled environment. And that's why a lot of people like them, because they can really control the breeding environment of these birds. And this is the other extreme, canary and budgie breeders. You know, they have a really high bird density. And so the other thing to consider is the biological density in this sort of setup is huge. So you need really good air quality, really good ventilation in this setup without having too many drafts. Otherwise, if you've got too many birds and the airflow is not good, it'll be dusty, so they're more prone to respiratory diseases and other issues. And also the ammonia that builds up from the birds' droppings, if your hygiene's not spot on, it can cause, a lot of these birds will go blind with cataracts caused, well, it's actually a corneal edema, they call it, but it's caused by the ammonia to the droppings, and the bird's eyes go cloudy from too high density. So, you know, if you want to keep birds this way, then just be aware of that. So the materials we mentioned before, you know, steel versus wooden frame. Wooden was the old way of doing things because that was easy and readily available material, and some people still favour it because it's got a softer look and works in with vegetation a lot better, but it's not quite as resistant to rot and mites and other pests as what steel does. And steel, not everyone feels comfortable working with steel, so you know, it just depends on what material you're happy using. The cladding, the type of roofing you're using, the type of netting, and then, like I mentioned before, the type of substrates. They're all things you've got to think about beforehand. So these are the Averys that we've seen many times before, made out of galvanized steel frames and cladding. And the main disadvantage is the fact that they're not very well, they're not insulated at all. So this one's under a tree, so it's not so bad. But imagine if you're out west and you've got the sun hitting it in the middle of summer, that will quickly get really hot. The other issue you can have is that all steel and metal Averys can be quite noisy, and particularly if you've got big birds banging up against the wire, it really can get quite noisy and sound really industrial. So that's why they're not super popular with everyone, but definitely the most common Avery design these days. This particular complex, which Simon will probably recognise as well, was in the Czech Republic, and this is all made out of stainless steel. So the frames are welded stainless steel, the mesh is all stainless steel. It was a big U-shaped complex with a garden in the middle and a pond, and then joined on the roof with by stainless steel meshed in as well. So it was a whole compound made out of it, and the guy built it all himself. It was a pretty amazing complex, and this is his enclosed section from the back, so fully tiled, stainless steel doors, heat bars in there, its own sink. It looks better than most things made for people. This is a more traditional wooden type Avery. Easy because you just got to nail things together, and you can nail the mesh on. It's very quick. But for example, you've got chewing parrots, it's not necessarily suitable. And like I mentioned earlier, if you get an outbreak of mites or something else in there, it can be really hard. And it's very difficult to actually disinfect timber unless you paint it and have a non-porous surface over the top. You can't actually disinfect it very well. So there's some of the issues you need to think about. And these are the insulation panels. This is the start of my Avery at home, and you can see you're looking into the bird room, and the panel's starting to go up. The big advantage, well, obviously the insulation is an advantage, but the other big advantage is you don't need any framework for the walls. So they just self-supporting, they fit in these channels, they interlock with each other. These, the ones on the ends are 100 mil thick panels, and they do really deflect the heat quite well. And they're also a very smooth surface, so easy to keep clean. You can just hose it off if you need to as well. So the only framing I really needed was at the front where the flights were going to go, and that was an engineering requirement to get it approved by council. But if the council weren't involved, I wouldn't have needed, such heavy C-purlins. These are some of the dividing walls between the flights. You can also see I've got insulation panels laying on their side in the flight section itself. So that acts as, if you like, my rat wall going around also. And this is the walkway on the right-hand side behind each of the Finch flights going out. And these are the roof panels that go on, and again, they sort of just interlock with each other, and they slide in quite well. They're actually heavier than they look, but when you got someone as what's the word, resourceful as Brownie, we worked out a system, or he worked out a system, I should say. I say with the royal we. As a builder, I'm a really good apprentice, and as an apprentice, I'm a really good coffee maker, and as a coffee maker, I'm shit. So there you go. But we worked that out pretty easily. Those panels interlock quite well, and they provide a lot of insulation. The other way of dealing with, weather extremes, particularly extreme heat, and that's something I guess it's more of an issue up here in Queensland, but certainly up to Western Sydney in the middle of summer, it's an issue, is you need some airflow over the top of the Averys, and even just suspending the roof above the top of the Avery can provide that airflow to just take away the sting out of the heat. And if you can cool the roof over the top of that, again, with either water or some misting system or some other system, then that can really help. But that air layer between the top of the Avery and the roof can make a really big difference. And that doesn't necessarily cost you a huge amount of money, because the panels can be expensive, although you can get them secondhand quite at a good price. But this is another way of dealing with that sort of issue. Mesh is another consideration. Unfortunately, the quality of galv mesh in Australia is not as good as it used to be. Although the White's wire, which was a disaster a few years ago, they've improved lately, and some of the rolls that I got weren't too bad. The advantage of stainless steel mesh is there's no toxicity issue. So if you're not aware, with galv mesh, if parrots chew at the solder on the corners of the strands where they meet together, and you get some dags on there, and they can chew those and they've got lead and zinc in them, and they're quite toxic. Whereas the stainless doesn't have that problem. The problem with the stainless is it reflects a lot of light, so it can be quite bright, and it's very hard to paint compared to the galv, and it's also more expensive. And this is just a photo showing an Avery complex with the wire painted on the left. It's just galv wire, but it's painted on the left and not painted on the right. And most of you know that looking through black mesh, you can see the birds a lot better than you can just seeing it through normal mesh. The only thing I wouldn't do is paint the roof because you don't want hawks and goshawks and other predators seeing your birds right through easily. You want to make it as hard for them as possible. And then there's this knit wire, which is this woven stainless steel mesh. It's a really nice material. It's very soft. It comes in, I think it's only 15 or 20 meter rolls, but it's 2 meters wide. And if you sew the widths together, you can form a blanket of it and then just pull it over an Avery structure. And the advantage of this stuff is it doesn't need anywhere near as much support. And because it's stainless steel, it's vermin proof, and they won't chew through it. And that's only about a 6 millimeter diameter at the largest part. But the good stuff comes from the UK. It is a bit more expensive, but you're saving on the amount of framing you need to use it. I was going to use this on my Avery complex, but the only thing that put me off it is when I was talking to Danny Brown about it, he said if something falls on the roof and it bows the roof, you can't stretch it out again. That bow stays there. So from an aesthetic point of view, it's not so good. And also, if you had it going all the way to the ground, I think dogs or foxes could tear through it. It's not that strong. It's quite a thin diameter, but for mice and rats in most places, it works really well. And also, if the birds fly into it, it tends to have give in it rather than a solid piece of mesh, which may not have a give. And that can be important if you've got parrots or pigeons, that can fly off explosively and come to grief. And the other alternative, of course, for meshing is nylon mesh. And this is Steve Sass's on the birds when it was open, on the perch, I should say. Sorry, Steve. And he used a lot of this material. And also Ian Brown, a lot of you would know, has used this. And eventually this is the material that I chose to use for my Avery. But there are several things you've got to remember. The good thing about it is it needs minimal support. It's very soft. The birds just bounce off it. It looks really nice. It looks like you're looking more through a shade house than you're looking through an Avery. And like I said, the birds hit it and they just bounce straight off. So it's awesome, but it's not vermin proof. So if you're going to use this sort of material, don't use it all the way to the ground. You need to stop rats and mice in particular getting onto it. And don't use it if you have fences or trees really close to where your Avery is going to be built where they can jump onto it. And Steve found that out at his place, but it's just one of the no-brainers. So you need to have a solid material around the base of the Avery, and I'd say minimum a metre before you use this stuff, and you don't want it too close to a house or a wall or a fence or anything like that where things can jump onto it. But otherwise, and the other thing is it's really cheap to purchase compared to wire mesh. So vermin proofing I've talked about a few times, and there's different ways of doing it, and the mesh size and materials is really important. And I think if you're doing any sort of perimeter fencing or meshing around an Avery, you really got to go for 7 mil or 6 mil 1/4 inch steel. There's nothing else that's going to stop mice getting in. And I even think, I don't understand why parrot blokes build these massive Averys and they use 1 inch square mesh and then complain that the sparrows get in, or the red brows, and eat all all their seed all the time, and the mice are going to be getting in there as well. If you just built a compound around it or enclose the outside perimeter in 1/4-inch mesh, then it doesn't matter what size mesh you actually keep the parrots in, you're going to stop all these vermin and predators going in, and the money you'll save just on your seed bill alone, you know, would pay for that, I would think. So that is really important. The Avery compound concept that I talked about before, where you're building a fortress around the outside, and then you have your individual Averys inside, is one way of dealing with it. Rat walls versus Avery skirts. I'll get into that in a little while with a photo, as well as some capping, which is what you use on the to stop something climbing up a wall and onto your mesh. Electric fencing can be a really good deterrent for a lot of predators, particularly birds and cats. And like I said before, attention to detail during your planning and construction is important. But no matter what you do, you've got to keep monitoring. If something starts to sag or bow, if there's a weakness in your armor, you know those mice and rats are going to find it. And you've got to have baiting around and look for any signs and keep the area around the Avery nice and clean so you can see any signs of vermin activity. I think that's pretty important. So this is David. I apologise, David, because you've seen this talk, but anyway, this is the base of David Pace's Averys, and this is a traditional rat wall that a lot of people have built in the past, and traditionally we'd go down 60 centimetres or so with a corrugated tin or some sort of footings, and the idea is if a rat hits the wall and tries to dig underneath to get in, that the sunken wall will prevent it from doing so. And often it does, and it does the job, but it can be difficult to do because you've got to dig a trench around the base of the Avery, you've got to go down a fair way, and it just can be a little more problematic. So the other solution is just to put a skirt around the base of the Avery. So this is, again, my complex, and around the base of the slab, I've actually laid down 1/4-inch stainless steel mesh, and it's stainless steel so it lasts longer in the ground, and it's been nailed with aluminium and concrete anchors into the concrete slab. And then further down where the actual flights are, there's concrete footings there, but I've concreted the 1/4-inch mesh into that. And the idea is I'm going to cover this with gravel, and then if a rodent comes up to the edge of the concrete and tries to bury underneath the concrete to get in, it's just going to hit this 1/4-inch stainless steel mesh and not be able to get through. And as long as the end of it isn't sticking up, so the right-hand edge of the skirt, if you like, as long as that's buried underneath, they're not going to go all the way back and then go underneath that and dig under your slab. And not preventing them from digging under your slab, can be a bit of an issue. The other thing you can do, of course, if you've only got smaller Averys, is just put a 1/4-inch stainless steel on the floor and then cover that with whatever substrate you're using, and that'll stop them coming through as well. But if you've got a bigger Avery and you're trying to plant it, then that's not practical. And using this skirt is a really simple way of doing it, and has worked. I know of a few Averys where this has been done, and it's worked really well for more than 10 years. Oops. Apologies, Brownie. This is an old photo on the internet, but the idea of these are just some suspended Averys, but you can see the double strand of electric wire that's underneath. So if anything tries to climb up the galvanized steel around the base there, then they're going to hit those wires before they hit the Averys. And this is another photo of VM Brown's. So he's got his footings down here and his steel or galvanized steel base. Then he's got 1/4-inch mesh here with electric wires. There's 4 strands in this one. Then this is the capping I was talking about, which is just a bit of flat steel going over the top. So if anything does manage to go through and your electric wires are down, they still have to get around this before they get onto the higher end of the flight, which is made out of the nylon. And this is just a top view of the capping with the electric wires underneath, and you can see them also going further down. So they've got to go to a lot of trouble to get past all this defense to get up here. Other ways people have used, different caps underneath suspended Averys to stop things climbing up, and they're variably successful, but generally they're not high enough, and most vermin can jump over. If you've seen an Antechinus run up, they can jump over 1 metre easily. onto wire. A snake can stand up well over a metre to get onto mesh. So they're not that successful, but they'll stop some of the mice and some of the smaller things getting in. And then Avery substrate is quite important. And with any Finch Avery, you can certainly plant Averys, but you can still make them relatively disease or less disease prone by having really good drainage. So you need a substrate that drains well. And maybe what you need to do, depending on where you live and the layout of your Avery, is actually dig some drains into the or underneath in the ground, and then cover them with some free draining gravel to make sure you don't have pools of water lying around, particularly around spilt food, because that's where all the trouble starts. Just be aware though that if you are putting drainage in, you need to be really careful about where that's exiting the Avery and stopping predators from getting in. So in my particular situation, I have, there's a concrete plinth, if you like, at the base of a slope where the flights finish. And I have some holes, some drainage holes placed in there. Some are 90 mil, some are only 40 mil, but they're all capped. And I can remove the caps by unscrewing and then screw them back. And the holes are no bigger than 1/4 inch mesh. So nothing can get back up through the drainage holes. So just be aware of that if you haven't thought about it. Different ways of feeding birds. There's some people use sliding swivel feeders, which are okay, but I find they rust, and they also birds try and stick their heads or get through the gaps, and so I've kind of gone off them a little bit. But for a lot of people, they work really well. You can just put, as long as you have double bowls, you put one lot of bowls in with the food, and have the other bowls getting cleaned, and next day you replace them. So and you don't have to enter the Avery, so they're quite good. These are more stainless, again on a swivel arm, but with different types of bowls. European setup. This is a sliding feeding mechanism, which is good because some of the bigger birds can flip the food bowls if you just have them in an open tray. So the idea is that there's a channel that goes underneath, the dish slides under, but there's a lip on top so they can't actually flick them over. The only disadvantage you can see is if you put your water next to your food dish, you're always going to have a higher contamination of your water. And one of the things that I like to do is try and have the water at the other end of the Avery to the seed dish. So that way the birds, they have to exercise more to get there, but your water dish stays cleaner for longer. And so that can make a difference, particularly in warmer weather. And these are the Thompson type feeders. So that illustrates how, that's the unit on the top right. That's how it looks on the left when it's in an Avery. It's got a little aluminium flap here that flaps down, and then you slide the dishes out, as you can see on the bottom right photo. And if you have double dishes, again, you can replace them. Very easy to keep clean, very easy to service, and Brad does a great job with them. These are the Thompson feeders. And there's other designs. Everyone's got their own way of doing things. This is one that I saw on the internet one day, and I think it was someone here in Oz who did that. And he's just used a lot of plumbing fixtures to just feed from the outside. The feed comes through inside the Avery, and then there's a big area to catch the spilt seed, which he collects again on the outside. So it's quite well designed. And the more traditional large feed tables where mesh is used and the feed is just put in different bowls and it all spills through. And that's often the way in large Averys. They can be a bit unsightly, but and then you've got a lot of debris you've got to collect from the floor. So if you can somehow trap all the spilled food without the birds getting access to it, that's the best way. And when I had external feeders in the walkway, I'd have sliding trays underneath the feed station to collect all that sort of food. So that works quite well. These are traditional hoppers. I hate hoppers. I just can't get them to work. They either clog up, or some of the birds, they just flick everything out because they're looking for the one seed they want, and I've just given up on them, and I much prefer bowls. But for a lot of people, they work really well, and they can provide a lot of seed, for a long period of time, so you don't have to change it very often. You just got to make sure, A, that it's flowing through. So what's in that dish right at the bottom of the dish is actually fresh seed, not just husks. And you've got to make sure that nothing's got in under the glass and got stuck in the actual feed storage area, and you haven't checked them for a day or two. That can be disastrous. But for a lot of people, they work well. Again, Simon would recognise this. This is again in Germany, but that feed station is in the walkway and it can be totally removed. So the whole idea is the birds can come into the feed area. You can close it off, which is where that pulley and wire is. A slide goes down that stops the birds going back into the aviary. And then you can lift off that entire feed station and take it to wherever you need to go. So if you need to put the birds into another aviary, you just move the whole feed station and take it there. If you need to take it inside to do something with the birds, whether it's to the hospital or some other place, or you want to move them somewhere, but you minimize the stress by handling birds. And that's also what was used. Who came and spoke on the Pekin Robins several years ago at the conference? Oh, his name escapes me right now, but he used to do that with a lot of his soft bills. So moving soft bills, rather than grabbing them and stressing them and catching them, he'd get them to go into a catching area, a feed area, and then move that, detach it, and move it into a new aviary. So it's a good idea. And waters are also critical. We mentioned it briefly before, but you want a good supply of fresh water that can be replenished several times a day. But for me, the important bit is also, where does the overflow go? I don't like the overflow going on the floor because, again, you're creating problems. And so having some sort of catching dish that the overflow goes into, for me, is quite important. And you can see the white pipe underneath this container. It's sitting on a mesh drainage pit, and then it's taken away by the white downpipe underneath. And the water's provided on the top by just a little plastic irrigation hose. This is another one that was in the Czech Republic, and this was nice. It was all external, but what got us was the length. This was a massive complex, and this is all one big copper gutter collecting all the spilt water that after the bowls were washed out. So that seemed to us a little bit extravagant, but it was a really nice setup. And this is more commonly seen in indoor type aviaries, particularly Finch collections. So again, fresh water coming in, water overflow going through, flushing several times a day. And it's amazing what a difference having good water hygiene makes. Doesn't mean it has to be sterile, it just means it needs to be flushed and fresh. And you'll notice every time the tap comes on, the birds come and have a drink. They know when there's fresh water coming in. So if you can set up a system like that, A, it's a lot less work for you, where it's automated and then flushes on several times a day, and B, you're making sure your birds are getting good quality fresh water throughout the day. For some of the parrot breeders, particularly overseas, they use these little brass with these little nozzles in them, and so the bird pushes a little brass end in and water comes out. And a lot of the parrots can learn to do that. Obviously, it's not going to work for finches. Because of positive pressure, stuff doesn't go back into the water. It remains clean. But it's a little bit sterile for me. And I know birds love to bathe and do all sorts of things in their water. And there's other ways you can provide that. But yeah, in a lot of places, they use this sort of system. So some of the amenities you need to think of, you need power. Well, you don't have to have power, but it makes life a lot easier. And you can, whether you're using kitchen equipment, whether you want lights, whether you want heating elements in there, or even just be able to work up there with power tools that aren't always battery charged. Electricity makes a big difference. Water plumbed in just makes your life so much easier rather than carrying buckets everywhere. Lighting is quite important. And these days there's some really good automated lighting systems. And I managed to get one that runs on a dimmer system. They look like large fluoro lights, but they're LEDs actually. That you put along the walkway, and you can program them on your phone to come on and off for as long as you want and to dim over a period of time. So they can dim over 20 minutes, they can stay on at full brightness, and then after so many hours you can make them go down again, dim, so that they're not dark. You can keep them on a moonlit level for all night, so if the birds get a fright, they can see where to land. And then you can get them to come on brightly in the morning just before you can feed them. So in the winter when it's still dark, you can go and feed the birds in full light and they're already awake because you've been able to slowly wake them up rather than just flick a switch on and they go from dark to full light and they freak out for a while. So, and they're not expensive. They're the ones I used, I think they cost $130 or something for the actual dimmer unit. So they're not expensive at all and really helpful. Bird rooms where you can do all your bird related preparation is great, as well as having a kitchen and work areas and storage, because it keeps the other half happy, let's face it, and makes your life a lot easier rather than going backwards and forwards to the house to get things. Video cameras are great because they can get you to observe things. Security systems are great for the same reason. And enrichment opportunities are really important. So you need to be able to provide that for your birds, and we'll just go into that a bit more. So just a kitchen that you'll see with a fridge and freezer and workbenches and a sink, and it's pretty typical of a lot of bird rooms. This is a more upmarket version, if you like. This is again in Germany. Commercial dishwashers, everything stainless steel, commercial sinks, with pot scrubbers and everything. This was, you wouldn't find this in a lot of commercial kitchens. It was an amazing setup. But then everything this guy did was amazing. It was a really good setup. But you really just need someone to prepare the food. And we all know it can become tedious working with birds at times. So this is also our man cave or woman cave. So we need to make it so that it fulfills all our needs at all times of the day. And I think we need to sort of make it fun sometimes. So don't forget, if you can deck it out so it can make your life easier and make things done more efficiently, then that's a good thing. And video cameras are great because you can see what the birds are doing when you're not watching them in particular. And I remember Ian Brown mentioning one of these Wampu fruit pigeons swallowing an egg and eating it. And this pair would lay eggs and they would just disappear one day. And he was wondering which other species in the Avery got it. And in the end, he actually saw them. I think it was the cockbird eating his own egg from his own clutch. So you can observe behaviour that you can't otherwise see that can give you a lot of clues and help you to succeed and avoid disasters with species. So, and these days, the video cameras are not expensive and they can be wireless. So you can get a reasonably good setup. You can also double up as security. And you can also see what's going on around your aviaries on the outside, not just what's going on inside, which can be just as important. And if you're going to breed live food, you need to have somewhere to do that. And let's face it, with a lot of the species we keep, live food breeding is quite critical, no matter which type of live food you tend to favour. And they all have their optimal conditions in terms of temperature in particular, but also humidity to maximise their production. And it can mean the difference having the right live food at the right time between success and failure, particularly with rarer species or more insectivorous species. So don't forget to allow for that. This is just a comment about quarantine, and quarantine doesn't have to be a big fancy building. It just needs to be somewhere you can keep birds, and when you first purchase them, to make sure they're as healthy as you think they are, deworm them, treat them for external parasites, and just make sure they're super healthy. This is an incubation room. That's Martin Guth from ACTP, and this is their incubation room that they've got, which is quite really well done, and it's also separate from where the birds are actually hatched and raised. So that's quite important. So I guess in summary, I just want to say, you just want to plan what you're doing and really think about all those different things that can make a difference between success and failure. Plan it for the types of birds you want to keep, rather than just building a general one if you can. Build carefully, take your time. Just make sure you do it right. You're better off taking a little bit longer and doing it well than trying to rush things and cutting corners. And this is one I need to learn, and that's enjoy the process. You go through, it's like any building, you go through periods of frustration, other periods of elation, and it's about balancing it all up. And, you'll get there eventually. And, there's nothing better than doing it with friends and people who give you a helping hand. And, Ian Brown in particular has helped me immensely with this sort of project, and unfortunately for him, he still will be. But you can have fun doing the job. Thanks.
Very good.
Awesome, Stacey. Thank you very much. If there's any questions from people who are on Zoom, don't forget, just hold your space bar down as you ask. Please feel free to rip in. Anybody?
Fantastic, Stacey. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Given you've seen it twice. Yeah. You're the only person who's seen it twice.
The insulated panels, that looks fantastic. I'm really interested to see. Hope you continue to take lots of shots, Stacey, because
it's way past
really
that
interested
stage
to
now.
see the final product. I've actually got some people would be aware, I've got a concrete slab at my place where I was going to build a bank of sort of for special, just put one pair of Finches per Avery, sort of a bank of them at roughly, I think I'm planning them, can't really remember. I think the slab's like 6 metres by 5 metres something. So roughly 4 metre long Averys, but only maybe 700 or 800 mil wide.
Yep.
And doing at least the exterior and maybe the odd dividing wall in that insulated panel was exactly what I was going to do. So,
well, the main
I've tried to get a few builders to quote, and to be honest, I've not had much bloody success.
No, it's hard. It's hard. But the reason I chose the panels for the dividing walls, it wasn't for the insulation ability, to be honest. It's just that it's simple to use. You lay the tracks and you just slot them in, and it's neat. And I've got a bank of 6 smaller Averys in that complex, which will be about 3.8 metres long and about a bit under 1 metre wide. And they're all got, I think it's 35 mil insulation panels as dividing walls. Again, for the
I've used them, Stacey, on my ceilings.
That's right.
Of the insect room, as well as the shelters and the bird room. And as you say, you don't need all that. The structure, they bolt together. There's no drafts. There's nowhere for even a spider web, a spider to sort of get in. So it's clean and it's neat. And being white, it just highlights the birds a lot more. So I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, I agree. Mine are out of cool room panel. You don't need a builder, Sam. They're easy to build with yourself.
Yeah, I understand, but there's a hell of a lot. There's a hell of a lot of doors.
Hey, Sam, you might be better off with approaching some cool room guys to get it built.
What? Sorry.
Some cool room guys, the guys that build cool rooms.
I've asked them, and look, that's it. And as Gary said, putting up the cool room panels is not the problem. It's all the doors and everything. Anyway, and finding time to do it as well. But the other thing, I've got the panels on the roof of an Avery I've got out that people would have seen, a fair few people, out near the pool. And you're right, it's really simple to click all that together. And obviously all the flashings and everything are available to seal the whole thing. It's a terrific material, I agree.
And the insulation factor in the times of increasing temperatures, it is so warm in winter and much cooler in summer. So it really is worth its weight in gold. It's called Versaclad. I don't know if there's lots of different brands, but the one I use was Versaclad.
You'll find, in each state, there's different people who do them. And the thing is, and you can't quite appreciate it in this one, but the one I got wasn't white. It's actually a shale grey with a texture on the outside. So if you use a flat panel, it just dents more easily. This has got a bit of a texture, so it'll take a little bit more wear. But I wish they would do them in more colours. And unless you buy a whole roll of steel in a certain, and they'll colour it to whatever colour you want. That's a lot of money. It's not something most of us do. But some of the manufacturers will give you a choice of colours as well, so you don't have to go with white if you don't want to. But all the dividing stuff, all the internal stuff is all just flat and it's white. And
there's a couple of questions in the chat. First of all, saying thank you and great presentation, all the rest of it. But someone's asking what sort of species are you intending keeping? You have everything by the look of it, by the sound of it.
Well, and when Gary said, "Is this the talk you're going to give to the Finch Club?" I guess I was hoping to have it closer to being finished, and part of the compound, the Avery compound concept is to get across. You can keep you can adjust it to keep whatever you like, from largest parrots, except for the nylon netting, but everything else, from the largest parrots to the smallest softbills or finches, you can change the internal configuration to do anything. So this particular thing is 24 metres long and 11 metres wide, including the flights. And the Averys will vary like the flight sections will vary from 9 meters long by 6 meters to the smaller ones will be 3 meters by 6 meters, for example. And they all then have the equivalent shelter section that goes with it. And then the smaller breeding aviaries, I can keep either a pair of parrots in each, or I can keep a pair of specialist finches, or just keep excess young birds. You know, so I've got that flexibility.
There's another question from someone who I'm aware is a carpenter, and I'm surprised he hasn't used these panels. Do those roof panels, do you slip them up and then they slide together, like clamp?
Yeah,
it, or you have to sort of slide them into each other.
Brownie worked out a
That's what he's
way.
asking.
Yeah, Ian Brown should answer this, but they basically you overlap them and then you let them fall and they click into place. And I've got some video footage which which will be part of another talk, where we actually lowered them using a sheet lifter. And when we had what you use to lift cement sheet up to height, and we had that above the height of the roof, so that when the panel flopped over, it didn't fall too heavily. It half fell, and then we lowered it into place. And if it didn't click properly, you just lifted it up and clicked it back, and it just literally clicked into each other.
Right.
Each of those roof panels were 5.4 meters long.
Yeah.
And so there's no support under them. They're just self-supporting. You walked across that and they didn't even bow. I could jump up and down on that roof and it didn't even move.
No.
And what thickness is that? The roof? So 100 mil or something?
100 mil, yeah.
That was 100 mil.
Yeah. I think the ones I've got in the pool over are similar, and they would span well over 5 meters. I think it's actually 6 meters deep. Mine. But I think they can span much larger distances than that.
Okay.
You get thicker panels. Yeah, I've seen them on people's pergolas and things that at massive distances. Yeah, I think they're awesome. The other question that I was first of all, sorry, the wall panels, they just slide in once you put them in the track. That you just slide them, push them in.
Yep, and
correct?
then all we do is you use angle to then screw them into the ceiling.
Yep. Yeah,
The other thing
they just pushed into each other. Like you don't have to fix them together, I guess.
The other thing with the panels is that they've got grooves, so all the electrical cabling goes through. So it is really, really neat. And so electricians, or if you're handy, you can run all your power quite easily through it. And as you said, Sam, they're used for pergolas quite. It's kind of the in thing in all new homes now for the outdoor alfresco areas on the ceiling.
There's a couple of questions on YouTube as well. There's a couple of people saying thank you very much, Stacey. Terrific presentation. And there a few people were super keen to see you finished Avery's and more progress shots. So yeah, keep sending them to us or whatever. We'll have you back, I guess, when it's all done and the birds are in. And the other one, there's a couple of questions that somebody's obviously looked at, and I'll look into this tomorrow, saying that on Thompson's Avery product site, they're actually saying that they have actually stopped and closed manufacturing. So I'm behind the times here, which may be due to Barry being quite ill, unfortunately. So I hope that's not the case. Maybe, Simon, those sliding feeders and things there might be an opening in the market for ASAP to start get some. There is actually a metalworking shop next to my office and warehouse that I have. Maybe I can organise somebody else to take that on if Thompson's isn't doing it anymore.
Maybe.
ASAP, they were exporting to the Middle East in huge numbers, like really big numbers, some big collections. So I think there's a market there for good quality products.
Yeah. Obviously, I know all about manufacturing, but nevertheless,
but Stacey, I don't know. Are you busy as a vet or?
Yeah, that's right. You've got all this experience now as a builder, haven't you? Yeah.
Like I said, as a builder, see, that's the answer. As a builder, I make a great apprentice, and as an apprentice,
he makes a good caramel latte.
Does he make it, or is that like a pod machine or something?
A pod machine.
And I had the caramel, and he has the never admit in public that I drink caramel lattes either. Just
right.
Yeah. Well, but God, I hope it's full cream milk. You don't have almond milk or something, do you? One other question, which I don't know. This is a general FSA question. Does anybody have any, or general for everybody? Does anyone have any information on the World Online Gouldian Show to be held in November? I'm not aware of it. Does anybody out there have any knowledge of that? It's perhaps something we should look into. Sounds interesting. World Online Building Show. So maybe we'll have a look.
Sam,
which has just reminded. Oh, sorry, Jeff. Yep.
Yeah. I come across that a couple of days ago and shared it on the on our Bird Club page here in Dubbo, and also on the Aussie Finches page.
Right.
I don't know anything more about it. I just thought it looked interesting.
I've missed that, or maybe I thought it was one of your bloody dad jokes or something and skipped over it. Oh yeah, we'll have a look. Yeah,
I think it was yesterday I shared it.
The idea of these online shows sounds good. You know, there's a lot of online stuff, isn't there? That's if there's a positive to all this COVID business, and I think Jeff, actually in your area, you're about to go down into lockdown as well, I believe. I saw something
today, 1 o'clock this afternoon we did, and then 7 o'clock tonight, whole massive area, the western area, Walgett, Brewarrina, Burke, Nyngan, Bogan Shire.
Yeah, no good, is it? Yeah. So maybe these, and I mean these online shows, and even what we're doing tonight, you know, with Zoom and stuff. The fact that you're here, Jeff, you know, and Gary Finch here, and David from South Australia, and you know, and Stacey's talking from Queensland, and all the rest of it. We wouldn't have contemplated doing this sort of thing, you know, 2 years ago, would we? And even once we get out of all this, you know, I think it's great that we're all going to be able to, you know, I think this will sort of continue, you know, to include people not just nationally but internationally is terrific.
Oh, it's certainly great for members from all areas, and yeah, Stacey, a great presentation, and managed to finish the dishes and doing some stuff on my computer and.
It's cost effective too. You don't have to pay for Stacey's accommodation or flights or
or caramel lattes.
Sadly, Brownie, I don't know if you can do the building online. Can you? Julian, you know Julian Tay, who I presume Julian still lives in Canberra. I'm not sure. He's just said on YouTube. I suppose you've got, now that you're in lockdown, I suppose, and you've just about, as soon as you finish Stacey's complex, he's got one for you to build at his place.
Yeah, well, there's always something to do when you're retired. I do a lot.
That's right. I forgot you're retired now too.
I work cash in hand.
Of leisure.
I only do cash in hand jobs these days.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Oh, cash in hand jobs.
Only cash in hand
jobs. Oh,
jobs.
I missed the cash bit for a second there. Sorry, too much.
I suppose one of the things with building one of these areas like we're doing with Stacey's part-timers, it does take a while to get it right, and we are doing it right, and it has taken a while. How long have we been going, Stace?
18 months.
18 months. We've got the stage where all the netting's on now. The frames are in situ for the dividers and down the walkway and everything, and when everybody sees that, when it's finished, it's going to be spectacular. And all credit to Stacey for his forethought and whatnot to go into building something
words too, and
like this.
You know, we all say that, don't we? You know, if only we'd done it right the first time, you know. But I don't know how many Averys and houses I've been to, and you know, I still managed to bugger it up.
I think there's been some really nice Averys that people have built without having kept birds before, and they've built these amazing complexes but made some real fundamental errors, and it's just ruined their enjoyment because all they do is replace birds. I guess, you know, we're trying to avoid making those mistakes, and that's
just one question. I can't remember what you said the depth of that complex is, 6 meters or something, was it? In terms of light at the back of the Averys, are they all, is it a completely solid roof the whole way, and have you got any concerns over light getting in?
Well, if you look on that photo, so that's the roof over the shelter.
Yep.
And so the lights are on the back wall. There's 3 large 2-foot LED lights that span along the back that give you enough light. And then the flights are totally open. They're going to be meshed. They're to the left. They're going down that hill.
Sorry, it's got a mesh roof to the left.
To the left, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I think I missed that.
Yeah.
And probably the person who asked you as well.
And it's quite a slopey block.
The depth of the shelter is...
It's a 5 metre
Right, with a metre
That's
walkway, so maybe 4
Yeah.
metres or something.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, Stacey, what I might have missed it. What birds were you planning to sort of kick off with?
By the time I
Zebra
finish this,
finches?
it'll be donation zebra finches and bush budgies until I pay off the debt.
I kind of thought that red cheek parrot was an indication, but
It wasn't a
You've
red
got
cheek.
some Isabels.
oh right, was it
It
a
was a
racket?
solid, it was a singing parrot from the
Singing
Solomon
parrot.
Islands.
Sorry, I thought it was a female red cheek. I only had a quick look at it, but
And,
I thought you must have been up at Cape York recently. But
Yeah.
singing parrot, well, that's even more of a challenge.
yeah.
Where have
Just
you
as,
been?
they're just as bad as each other.
Yeah. No, I meant getting it.
Okay.
You've been using those dugout canoes.
Yeah.
I did get a picture sent to me from Denmark yesterday of a nice young racket tail that was in a weaning cage.
Oh, excellent.
So Klaus Uthoff
Very
had
good.
some success with the racket tails this season, and St. Vincent's, and he's bred some fig parrots, and yeah.
Very good. Well, there's some of those species here too. So
Yeah.
just how big's your bank balance? David, I think in answer to your question, it's going to be some finches and some smaller Australian parrots. And I guess I'll leave the details till it's all finished and
for another talk.
With some photos.
Yeah.
So there'll be some colonies of stuff with some of these aviaries, just a colony, like a colony of red-faced parrotfinches, if I can find any decent ones, and a colony of red siskins and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, cool.
How many breeding aviaries will there be?
There'll be 5 largish sort of finchy type flights, and then 6 smaller individual pair type aviaries. And the individual type aviaries you can open a flap near the top, and the birds can fly out into the big flight aviary too.
Yeah.
For some flocking or mixing or whatever I want to do.
And are you building in holding aviaries as well?
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's all I've got. So
right. Yep.
I haven't followed my advice in terms of building specific holding aviaries, but I think they'll end up doubling up some of those smaller aviaries. So we'll have a pair of small parrots and a heap of hopefully some young finches in there too.
And a dirty big kitchen.
And yeah. Well, it's not that big, but
it's what, 5 meters by 4 meters. That's a big room for a kitchen.
It'll fill up pretty quickly.
It's especially when he's got to put a bed in there.
Exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
All the guys
done all this, and
look
then
at it, just
standing
going,
Funny you should say that.
Brownie knows my domestic situation.
He's a very lucky man.
Thanks, Brownie.
It's the walk up the hill that's going to kill him.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I mean, you had to get lucky sooner or later, right?
Right. Okay. I've got to take control of this meeting.
Thanks, Sam.
I think I might have been the problem to start.
What took you so long?
Thank you very much, Stacey. Much appreciated. I've just got a message saying that and we'll share it on our FSA one, confirming what Jeff said, that apparently there's a Facebook group or page or something for this online Gouldian thing. So we will certainly go and have a look at it and share it around, because it sounds like a good idea. And that just reminded me, we've got our sale, remember, coming up in December, which at this point in time is still going to be an in-person bird sale at the Prairie Wood Hall. The Prairie Wood Hall at the moment is the centre of COVID in Australia, really. It's right in the middle of Fairfield, and it's being used by the Department of Health as a testing and vaccination hub, I believe. So the chances that that's available for mid-December may be a little sus. And the reality is people may be reluctant to come into that area anyway, in which case we would revert, I believe, at this stage to an online auction, same as we had last year. which was, look, it was incredibly successful. And to be honest, we actually made a quid out of it too, mainly because we sold a lot as part of the auction. Not so much the birds. Obviously, that money went to the breeders. Not that that's the point of it. But I would hope that it would be even more successful. And we may look at particular breeders. I have had brief discussions with the transport company that we use, who were fantastic. And we may actually be able to look at some larger breeders around New South Wales, rather than them bring the birds to us to auction, that they keep them at their place, and we'll organise transport direct from their place for those sort of trusted ones. If you recall, last year we had I think it was 230 odd pairs of birds, but they all came to the hall and we checked them in and we checked their health and did all the normal stuff that happens before a normal bird sale, and then they were shipped from there to either using commercial shipping or they went to various suburbs, like including Central Coast and Illawarra, where people then came to those locations around Sydney, on the outskirts of Sydney, and picked up their birds. So we would revert to that if we can't have a sale. In terms of next month, I'm pretty confident that we will be back on Zoom again. I can't see us being back in the hall, and to be perfectly honest, I'd be very surprised if it was October, was back to normal by October. But at this stage, the AGM, which is normally September, will be in October for a variety of reasons, including the Constitution, I guess, that we've got to give at least a month's notice. If you are looking, if you would like to stand for a position, it'd be much appreciated if you would let a member of the committee know if you're thinking about it. And the positions, I guess, in this club, apart from the traditional ones, the president, secretary, treasurer, and that, a lot of the other positions have been created over the years because that's kind of what that person wanted to do. And that is completely reasonable. If you've got an idea and you would like to help, which might be something that, traditionally the secretary does, or traditionally a show steward does, or whatever it is, please let us know, because we'd love to have more people on the committee. At this stage, I believe we've got Maddie suckered in for another year, which is great news. I'm acting treasurer at the moment. That's since, as you're aware, Lynn passed away. So we are looking for a treasurer, definitely looking for a treasurer. I believe most other people, and, let's face it, we've still got 2 months to the AGM. I believe most of the committee are willing to restand, but certainly the treasurer's position would be much appreciated if somebody...
We're looking for a treasurer too. Maybe we could share one.
Right, yeah, maybe. Yeah, so there you go. And these days, I think you could be the treasurer remotely to both clubs, UFS and FSA down here. That would work.
Why didn't that go to Ian then? You said remotely and it went to Ian.
Retired, huh? You're dream.
That's right.
Looks like we just voted him in.
Too busy building Averys and looking after my own birds.
Well, you got to come down to build Sam's new Avery, so you may as well be treasurer.
Yeah, whatever.
Mind you, Simon was pretty quick to speak then.
Yeah.
I believe you can add up and subtract, can't you?
Sorry, the line went bad.
No, you can definitely add up and subtract. I remember I went one of these world trips with him, and I don't remember being ripped off. It seemed to work.
Well, you don't remember, but
I don't remember about different parts of that.
The key to that was the amount of beer that you had.
Yes. Anyway, thank you very much. Unless there's anybody else who's got something sensible to say. No, I shall. I'll just double check on YouTube that there's nothing I've missed. No, a few other people thanking Stacey. So thank you very much, everybody, and we shall see you back here again next month. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Great work.
Thank you, guys. Look after yourselves down there.
About 40 on Zoom and just over 20 on YouTube. So
glory.
60 all up. Night, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Good night.